Before we begin the episode, we wanted to give a quick trigger warning that we'll be talking about the devastating wildfires in Maui. We'll also provide a link in the show notes to the American Red Cross Maui Wildfires Relief Fund. If you have the ability, we strongly encourage you all to give something to help out. Your support will go a long way. Thank you.
The radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 99, recorded on Friday, August 18th from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, we'll talk about the recent Maui wildfires and the history of colonization of Hawaii. But first, the headlines.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
First up in headlines, DJ Trump, which those are actually his initials too, so it works that way.
I did appreciate how you put this in our show notes. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah. DJ Trump just dropped his latest indictment. Now number 4. He's a very prolific artist.
Was it a quadrilogy? What do you call this? we already made the trilogy joke last time, so I don't know what it's not working anymore with the Hollywood slogans and lingo and stuff. So it's really messing me up here. And if all the writers weren't on strike, I'd ask them too, but oh well. But that's right. Earlier this week, a grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, officially indicted Trump and 18 others on 41 counts connected with trying to overturn the 2020 election. Some notable names of those indicted include Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Mark Meadows, Ken Cheesebro, the greatest name to ever exist ever, Jeffrey Clark, former Trump attorney turned right-wing pundit Jenna Ellis, who, by the way, is apparently crowdfunding her defense fees for this case.
Well, as we've heard from Rudy Giuliani, Trump is not helping anybody out here.
Not surprised. And of course, the Kraken, Sidney Powell. So I wanted to also go over some of the charges. Like I said, I'm not going over all of them because there are 41 of them. But some of the charges against the 19 people include the violation of the Georgia RICO, or the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, solicitation of a violation of oath by a public officer, multiple false statements in writings, impersonating a public officer, forgery in the first degree, criminal attempt to filing false documents, criminal attempt to influencing witnesses, conspiracy to commit election fraud, conspiracy to commit computer theft, conspiracy to defraud the state of Georgia. And that's just a handful of those I picked out. There are many more. And Trump himself will be facing 13 of those charges.
And a Wisconsin connection, named but not indicted co-conspirator, is Wisconsin GOP chair Brian Schimming.
Great. We have to be involved some way with this, right?
And again, Josh Call, man, wake up.
Let's go, Josh.
What are you doing?
Come on, chop, chop. And the word of the day that came out of this entire thing was RICO. Are you now a amazingly well-tuned expert in RICO law?
I think like most people, most of my experience with RICO statutes come from The Sopranos.
Yeah. Georgia's RICO law is based off the broader federal RICO law that specifically targets organized crime. Hence, Jason's whole thing about The Sopranos. Think mobsters.
It's
literally
how Rudy Giuliani built his entire career.
Exactly.
By prosecuting the mob in New York with RICO statutes. So it would be very poetic if he ends up going to jail for himself under RICO charges.
Yep. It basically gives prosecutors the task of showing how multiple separate acts are woven together to create an overarching crime. When asked about it, Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis said, quote, RICO is a tool that allows a prosecutor's office and law enforcement to tell the whole story. And if you want more information on what RICO is and how specifically Georgia's RICO law works, look somewhere else, because we are not legal experts, for the love of God. Don't come to us for legal advice. This is awful. And now I upset the dogs.
The dog.
The dog. One of them has the cone of shame on it. He looks really sad.
They both had it earlier.
Oh, no.
We have another one that looks like he's wearing like a travel pillow on a
plane.
Oh,
no.
It's like a donut.
We'll actually include a video from Legal Eagle, if you're not subscribed to him on YouTube, I highly recommend it, on the recent Georgia indictment and the RICO law as well. So
I believe the title is Number 4 is RICO?
Something like that. So check that out as well. And what are Republicans saying about this? Well, let's find out. Thank you, Washington Post, for doing the job for us.
This should be decided at the ballot box, not in a bunch of liberal jurisdictions trying to put the man in jail. They're weaponizing the law in this country. They're trying to take Donald Trump down.
Their target is political. This is not the rule of law. This is not enforcing the law fairly.
Everyday Americans are concerned that they're going to be next.
Iowans are becoming desensitized to this. Iowans see there are two systems of justice.
It just feels more and more like we're in a type of country like the Soviet Union or other countries that criminalize political speech, that imprison political opponents.
Ah, good, rational, logical takes.
Are you worried that they're coming for you next, Joe? Do you think your name's going to pop up on one of these indictments?
Well, as the known conservative genius Ben Shapiro says, running for office now carries a good chance of going to jail for any reason. I'm terrified.
Ben Shapiro also said that maybe if we start treating politicians like criminals when they break the law, that maybe they'll stop breaking the law. But that was when he was talking about Barack Obama, when he wrote the whole book about why Barack Obama should be criminally prosecuted.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so that was different then because the president was black.
Oh, okay. And if you didn't hear this, that last voice was our favorite senator,
The pride of Wisconsin.
Ron Johnson, where we are now living in a Soviet authoritarian nightmare.
Right, you can't even go on a large national news network and criticize the president of the United States anymore without being thrown in jail. We expect that Ron Johnson is now halfway to a camp somewhere
he's
to be
terrified.
re-educated.
Yeah.
Sure, he's been arrested in the middle of the night. He's off to a re-education camp because this is Soviet Russia, and you cannot publicly criticize the president without being imprisoned.
Well, and don't you love how the Law and Order Party is now skirting so hard to avoid the law? I mean, heck, even like Lindsey Graham in the beginning of that was saying, this needs to be decided by the ballot box.
It was. And the whole point is they're trying to overthrow the results of the ballot box.
Thank you. And of course, Donald Trump lost his mind and had to go crazy about the whole indictment as well. On Tuesday, Donald Trump wrote on True Social. Are you going to do a voice or do you want me just to read it?
A large, complex, detailed, but irrefutable report on the presidential election fraud which took place in Georgia is almost complete and will be presented by me at a news conference at 11 a.m. on Monday of next week in Bedminster, New Jersey. Based on the results of this conclusive report, all charges should be dropped against me and others. There will be a complete exoneration.
And it's canceled. There's no more press conference.
Which is actually really smart. Like, definitely his lawyers convinced him to not do this.
Well, that's what it was. ABC reported, I think it was like 2 days after, saying that Trump's legal counsel was saying, for the love of God, don't do it. You're going to make their job so much easier.
Yeah, one, you're going to incriminate yourself. More than once. And two, you're going to lay out what your defense will be in court publicly to everyone.
Yes.
And give them ample opportunity to bolster their prosecution against you.
Well, and my favorite part about this whole thing, Jason, is because we're not going to be here for the next couple of weeks. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. But the Republican debate is next week. It's on a Wednesday, right? Mm-hmm. And the current debate in Republican circles right now is, should Donald Trump turn himself in on the day of the debate or the day after the debate? And make sure that he gets as much attention as possible from the debate without actually going to the debate stage. We are talking about if the leading Republican candidate for president should avoid the debate and turn himself in for indictments instead.
And he's even talked about giving a Tucker Carlson interview against the debate as counter-programming.
Why not?
As well.
Who cares at this point? Why not? We're in the worst timeline.
We are a very, very serious country, everyone. And just in case you thought it won't get better than this, it turns out that grand jury members were doxxed on right-wing websites. Per Georgia state law, grand jury members' names must be included in indictments that they presided over. That meant the names of the grand jury members were on that document that everyone was reading.
Yep.
And this week, the names of those grand jury members were published on right-wing social social media sites and pro-Trump forums, which also included their supposed social media profiles, photos, and even addresses, some of which appear to actually be other people that happen to have the same name as those grand jury members. I have some quotes. One from Truth Social. I'm looking forward to the fun some will have with the list of leaked grand jurors. And they typed out, "Mwah ha 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 ha." Another post from a pro-Trump forum said, "These jurors have signed their death warrant by falsely indicting President Trump."
I mean, and legitimately, that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. These people are going to
They're going to kill someone. Yeah, they're straight going to kill someone.
And it might not even be one of the people that was actually on this grand jury. It just might be any random person. That's going to be fun. And in case you think maybe their threats are just blowing off steam, this week, a Texas woman was arrested and charged with threatening to kill Tanya Chutkin, the federal judge overseeing the criminal case against Trump in Washington, D.C. She also threatened to kill Sheila Jackson Lee, a Texas Democratic representative. And if you remember our story from a month or two ago, the Secret Service had to arrest someone walking around with guns looking for Barack Obama near his home.
Yep.
But tell me again how January 6th was just a bunch of peaceful Trump supporters with some Antifa antagonists sprinkled in. They're not violent. They just support President Trump.
Well, and I'm still seeing that on Fox News even today, where people are trying to downplay what happened on January 6th. Because of course, during the whole things of, I don't know if you saw what happened in New York. We're not going to cover this story, but the riots in New York over that Twitch streamer.
Right.
Greg Garfield tried to basically demonize a riot because it was a bunch of predominantly black men.
Right. It was a black Twitch streamer.
Right.
That's who his fan base is.
But then when it came time to him trying to compare it to January 6th, he said, well, there are good people and bad people at January 6th. I'm like, are you serious?
There were only bad teenage black kids. And they're basically there to try to win like prizes and meet this Twitch streamer. It'd be like literally if PewDiePie decided to have some event in the middle of New York with like not enough planning, what would happen? Or if Taylor Swift had like, impromptu concert in the middle of Times Square.
Right.
It's exactly what would happen. It would just be white kids instead.
But still, to this day, you have Republicans and conservatives trying to downplay what happened on January 6th. These people are freaking dangerous, man.
Just a tour group that got a little too rowdy.
Ugh. So we'll bring you up updates as soon as they come out, but man, RICO cases take a very long time.
And just to note, being a state case, even if Trump or another Republican were to be elected president,
can't be pardoned.
They cannot pardon a state crime. And in fact, even the Georgia governor does not have exclusive ability to pardon. It's actually a board in Georgia.
And even that's 5 years after you serve your time.
Right. It's after you serve your time. You have to appeal to get it because Republicans are tough on crime.
I was just say, bad state to pick for all those tough on crime laws, Trump. Let's go back home to Wisconsin. Now, did you happen to see this viral video?
Yeah, well, I didn't watch the video, but I saw the story.
Okay. According to the article, Kenosha police arrested a black man at an Applebee's, except the actual suspects were in the bathroom. According to the article, Kenosha police have launched an internal investigation into an incident that occurred at a local Applebee's on July 20th. And we're just now hearing about it this week, so not great. Police said that witnesses told them they saw two black men and a black woman flee from a hit and run toward an Applebee's restaurant. One witness said the woman was carrying a child, according to police at least. An Applebee's employee told officers that some suspicious people who may have been involved in the crash were in the restaurant and directed officers to two people, including a black man holding a baby. Those officers tried to take the baby from the man and arrest him. The man yelled that he hadn't done anything wrong and officers should let him go. The video shows that after the officers removed the baby from his arms, physically I may add, they threw him down to the ground and an officer began punching him as he ordered the man to put his hands behind his back.
Standard operating procedure.
Technically, punching isn't correct. They put literal forearm blows into the back.
I'm surprised they didn't shout that he was going for their gun and shoot him in the back of the head, because the Kenosha police have done that before.
The man was arrested for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. The woman who was there, who was also at the scene, was arrested for the same charges as well as possession of THC. And I have to stress again, these people were innocent. They had nothing to do with the crime other than being
black in an Applebee's.
Literally. A week later, during a meeting with the local Fire and Police Commission, Kenosha's deputy police chief, which I do not care about naming, said, said, quote, "We reviewed the video and saw some things that we're concerned about and initiated a more formal review. And to this day, we are still waiting for that investigation to complete, and currently all officers are still on duty, and none are on paid leave."
Yeah, even if they were suspended, they would be getting paid anyway, thanks to the strength of the police unions.
This story is insane.
Yeah, it's like literally these people got into an accident, fled the scene, went into an Applebee's, hid in the bathroom, and because somebody at the Applebee's pointed the officers to the wrong people, they didn't take the time to verify what was
just two
going
black
on.
people and a kid.
Right, and they literally, all they needed to ask was,
"Did you see two black people?
Or where's your car? Let us check to see if your car is damaged," which would have been the main thing. They could have taken them outside, showed them their car, showed them that they had the keys to that car, and they would have known, okay, these are not the people that we're looking for. It would have been that simple, but they don't take the time to do that. They immediately escalate the situation to physical violence because they don't care about public safety. The police do not care about public safety. I don't know how many examples we need to see. The police are children with guns who are scared, terrified for their lives in every interaction they have, and particularly every interaction they have with black people.
Well, and what scares the crap out of me with this whole thing as well is that the amount of white conservatives who are bending over backwards to try to lick the boots of these officers, saying, well, you should comply no matter what happens, even if you're innocent. If you get a demand from an officer, you have to comply with it. Where are the standards for the police officers?
And who would, in their right minds, who just eating dinner with their family in an Applebee's
and starts getting accosted,
right, and is told by police, "Give me your kid, get down on the ground, put your hands behind," who's just gonna do that? You'd be like, no, what are you doing? What is this about?
That's not how people work, man.
Right. You wouldn't just do it. Well, you're a police officer, so I'm just gonna lay down face down on the ground. Here's my child. No one would do that.
I can't believe it, man. I cannot believe this. And obviously all the correct people have come out against this thing. The ACLU has correctly come out against this thing. Even a bunch of conservatives were like, oh, this is a little too on the nose for even me guys. This is bad. And I hope these people are brought to justice. I hope they're not on the force anymore because this is insane. And what a bad thing for a community that's still hurting since the whole Jacob Blake marches and protests back in 2021. There was a reason why this stuff is happening. There's a reason why tensions between people of color and the police are at an all-time high. It's because of crap like this. And even after conservatives had their worst nightmare come true where a bunch of black people supposedly burned down a city they cared so much about, no one learned a lesson anyway. They did the exact same garbage.
And the Kenosha Police Department has a long history of this, and it's not even just people of color.
No, it's not.
Michael Bell was shot, executed in front of his family by Kenosha police officers who mistakenly thought that he was grabbing for their gun, and they've never admitted what they did. They've never admitted to any wrongdoing, and it's very clear in that case that the officer's gun got caught on the side view mirror of the car, and he thought that meant that Michael Bell was reaching for his gun and trying to grab his gun, and they shot him in the back of the head right in front of his family. And they committed to that lie and covered it up, and to this day have not admitted that they were wrong. And all of the evidence, and any reasonable person looking at their evidence, their story changes every time this comes up. It's changed 3 times. One of the officers even committed suicide. It's very clear that they were in the wrong and just killed somebody when they should have just cuffed him and sent him to jail. Instead, they murdered him, and the entire police department is committed to covering it up. So I don't expect anything to come out of this because it's the Kenosha Police Department. They never admit when they're wrong, and they never face any consequences. I'm glad at least in this situation nobody ended up dead or paralyzed.
No kidding.
But how many times does this have to happen?
Dude, it's gonna keep happening, man.
And next, we'll go down south to Arkansas, where Sarah Huckabee Sanders' education department has nixed AP African American Studies course right before the beginning of the school year.
Great.
An official from the Arkansas Department of Education reportedly alerted high school teachers by phone last Friday that the class would not be recognized for course credit by the state in the 2023-24 school year. And unlike with every other AP class on offer, the state would not cover the $90 cost of an end-of-year test that gives students the opportunity to qualify for college course credit. Teachers were reportedly told that they could still offer the class, but the state will not recognize it on the same level as other AP courses. The course will not count as a credit towards statewide graduation requirements, and students will have to pay their own test fees.
Do they give reasons as to why?
There were none in any of the press releases or anything that I was able to find during the research for this.
Oh my God.
This kind of follows the same thing that happened, or similar thing that happened in Florida, where they decided to throw out their African American studies curriculum as well. I'm sure PragerU is developing the new course. So this is just a continued attack on any history that is inconvenient for white Americans and the mythological history that we have of George Washington chopping down the cherry tree and everything being just swell.
I mean, dude, I can't even imagine the idea that we're now in this, again, worst timeline ever, where now we have states literally going backwards as far as education of marginalized groups goes.
Because it's all critical race theory, and we all know critical race theory was invented by the devil.
I am seeing that at least some schools are still going to offer the course.
Right, they can, but there's no incentive for students to take it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Hey, and it's just this stupid political desire to win these dumb culture wars and score cheap political points. That's all this is.
Yeah.
This is what the Republican Party has become.
Yes. Trying to one-up each other on the national
bad
stage.
you can be.
Yeah. About how racist and how much you can own the libs.
Well, and then again, Jason, that's the thing where it's okay, fine. Let's say you're a conservative. You're pretty like far right conservative, right? And you are terrified of what liberals and Democrats are doing. And you're terrified of the supposed transgender ideology and the woke ideology.
They're brainwashing our kids.
Right. At least you can say that there's a purpose behind the idea of the things that you hate. You could say at least liberals and progressives have a vision for what they want. You may hate it as a conservative, but at least they have a vision. All this is just bullying people for no reason. There's no good reason. I mean, like you said, they didn't give any reason publicly for this to begin with. They're just trying to outdo each other for being the worst human being possible. And that's it. That's the end game.
I can tell you what I would think that the reasoning's for.
I mean, we know what the reasoning's for.
I mean, so what I would say publicly if I was a Republican is say, well, we found out that the material in the courses does not meet the standards of our education system. We feel like it divides people and teaches that America is racist and that just by being white, you're an oppressor.
And everything else makes white students hate themselves.
Right, and everything else that they came up for to attack critical race theory, it's all just going to be that, and then just apply it to this AP African American Studies course.
And I do not ever want to hear a conservative ever tell me again that the liberals and the Democrats are the ones that have to deal with identity politics all day long. I'm sorry, we didn't go on a whole gigantic countrywide backlash of banning books, of banning classes because they're worried about white identity.
Every conservative comedian can't perform in any venue that children are allowed into. I remember when we had that law when Obama was president.
Right. Now, I almost made this article the Fox in the Head segment, but since it's about a serious topic, I thought we should actually talk about it a little bit.
And we did mention it last week.
Yeah. Well, not like the crux of this article, but the subject.
Right. We talked about the buoys that are on the Rio Grande that have razor wire and literal saw blades.
Literal saw blades
attached to them, designed to maim and kill refugees attempting to declare asylum in the United States.
That is correct. And since then, the federal government actually sued Texas, arguing that the Rio Grande is under federal control and that no structure or obstruction can be built in a navigable river, that's the main crux of this thing, owned by the government without their explicit permission. Okay, fine. And Republicans are losing their minds. And in an amicus brief filed on behalf of multiple Republican representatives, both in and out of Texas, I don't know why other Republicans are getting involved in this. It's weird. The Texas Public Policy Foundation tried to counter the federal government's claims about navigability by citing Noah's Ark. I'm not kidding. Quote, the government's theory that navigability is established if navigation was ever possible at any time in history would lead to absurd and likely unconstitutional results. The geologic record shows that most of Texas was once covered by seas. Indeed, if one takes the book of Genesis literally,
and one shouldn't,
then the entire world was once navigable by boats large enough to carry significant amounts of livestock. Genesis 7:17 through 20.
English Standard Version.
Under the federal government's theory, these anecdotes These anecdotes would render any structure built anywhere in Texas an obstruction to navigation subject to federal regulation.
Yeah, I don't think they were like citing the Permian period during the late Cretaceous. It's like literally like if there's enough rain, you can navigate down the Rio Grande.
No.
Not 15 million years ago, fossil records indicate.
We live in a world where we're trying to take the book of Genesis literally as a serious legal argument now.
This is the perfect demonstration of exactly where we are with the GOP and Christian nationalism.
No kidding.
Citing the book of Genesis to try to win their case so that they can maim and kill
brown people,
immigrants seeking refuge in the United States. And again, let's ignore everything that supposedly they believe in the teachings of Jesus and how those that are wealthy should help the poor. Forget all of that.
No, you saw this. They just got to Genesis. They didn't get that far yet.
We're only in the parts where God kills people just because he wants to. That's the God that conservatives really believe in.
I bet if you asked them how many of each animal they brought on Noah's Ark, and then you told them
they'll start talking about types. I know this argument.
Oh, God. They're so stupid, Jason. They're so dumb. I hate it. And speaking of dumb,
M&Ms will not be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappealing and totally androgynous. Until the moment you wouldn't want to have a drink with any one of them. That's the goal. When you're totally turned off, they've won.
Boy, ain't right.
For our Fox in the Head segment this week, we got more of our favorite senator of all time, Ron Johnson, who on Maria Bartiromo's segment on Fox News claimed about how the FDA supposedly approved ivermectin to treat disease such as COVID-19. Let's listen.
We learned this morning that the FDA is now saying that it's okay to take ivermectin if you have COVID. I mean, Senator, I remember talking with you repeatedly during COVID about your upset that they were trying to cancel you because you were talking to doctors to try to find out the right ways to treat COVID without having to get too many boosters and COVID shots. My COVID was gone in a day when I took ivermectin. And now 3 years later, the FDA says, oh, yeah, that's fine. Take ivermectin. What?
Maria, you know the doctors I've been dealing with and talking to for years now. They believe that probably hundreds of thousands of Americans lost their lives because they were denied early treatment. And they were denied it because the FDA sabotaged, for example, ivermectin. And they said, come on, y'all, you're not a cow, you're not a horse. You know, this is supposedly horse medicine. No, this is a Nobel Prize-winning medicine that could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. We are going down a very dangerous path, but as a path that is being laid out and planned by an elite group of people that want to take total control over our lives. And that's what they're doing bit by bit. They do it by increasing massive government spending, increase in the size of government, takeover of the WHO. These amendments that are coming up that are going to be voted on in 2024 on the WHO are frightening, and they really risk taking away all of our sovereignty. People have to awaken to the dangers of the moment.
Yay, some medical misinformation and conspiracy theory fear-mongering from the stupidest senator.
On Wisconsin.
Why do we keep... We're the state that elected Joseph McCarthy and Ron Johnson. We are really at danger. We're going to get, sold to Canada at some point if we keep doing this.
No amount of cheese will save us.
Everything he said is both wrong and crazy.
Well, okay, and let's quickly recap for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about. There was a recent memo from the FDA that said legally we cannot do anything to stop doctors from prescribing ivermectin. That's what the memo said. They're not saying they endorse it. They're not saying that it cures COVID or doing anything like that. They're just saying, don't do it, but if a doctor does, we can't stop you.
It's not an approved use of ivermectin. It's an off-label use.
Correct. It has never been approved by the FDA.
It is an anti-parasitic. There have been many studies that checked its efficacy in treating COVID. They have conclusively and without fail proven that ivermectin is not an effective cure or prophylactic against any strain of COVID, despite shrill Maria Bartiromo's
I was done in a day.
I got cured immediately. As soon as I saw the tube of horse paste, my COVID is just gone. It is an anti-parasitic used to treat worms.
Well, and what scares me so much about this is while everything he said was absolutely insane, he did the whole nod to the conspiracy theorists saying, hey, there's this secret elite group of people who who want to control you.
They're going to, it's New World Order. They're going to take over the World Health Organization and destroy American sovereignty.
Also, I don't know about you, Jason, but I hate when people call it the WHO.
The WHO?
I hate it so much.
So it's kind of like a who's on first bit, just waiting to happen.
Just say the WHO.
Or the World Health Organization. It's not that long.
Don't call it the WHO. We have a whole band that's called that already.
And we usually don't call the CDC the CDC. The CDC. I hate medical misinformation.
I thought you were saying Ron Johnson.
Well, I also very much hate Ron Johnson. But medical misinformation has always been one of my biggest pet peeves. It's probably the thing more than anything else that pushed me to my current beliefs. Because that's kind of how everything started, of like skepticism, atheism, and then eventually humanism. And where I'm at right now was following people who fought against medical misinformation because it's so dangerous. You're literally, more than any other type of misinformation, this kills people.
Yes.
Flat out kills people.
And I hate this too, when he talks about how the doctors that I've spoken to or that I talked to.
Yeah, Pierre Corey.
Literally, it's the same handful of doctors who are being rightfully discredited by the entirety of the medical community. And Joe Rogan does the same crap too, where he says, well, the doctors I talk to, which just gives them this cloud and protection of authority, when in reality, they've got nothing to stand on. On Wisconsin, Ron Johnson makes us proud.
We had the chance last year
but
to never
Mandela
hear from this guy again.
Was a black guy, and we don't like
racist.
that.
Waukesha does not vote for black people.
We got him until 2028, man.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? It's hard to get any word in with this clown.
So let's talk about what's going on in Maui.
As many of you probably know, if you've watched the news at all over the last week and a half, there were wildfires on the island of Maui, which are now the deadliest fire in U.S. history in over a century. And just for a little local flair before we get into all of the horrible details, do you know what the current deadliest fire in U.S. history was?
I mean, I know the answer because I'm from Wisconsin, but...
It is actually the Peshtigo Fire of 1871 in northeastern Wisconsin. It is a fire that killed over 1,100 people and burned about 1.5 million acres on both sides of Green Bay. It actually did not go to Green Bay, like down and around. The fire went over Green Bay, which is not a small piece of water. So that's pretty impressive. And actually, the second deadliest fire in U.S. history was also in Wisconsin and Minnesota in 1918. So kind of odd. You don't think of Wisconsin being the big wildfire state, but we actually have the first and second most deadly fires in U.S. history. And just to compare, that fire in Peshtigo, like I said, 1.5 million acres. The fire in Maui is just over 2,100 acres, to give you a size comparison. And why doesn't really anybody know about the Peshtigo fire in 1871? Just so happens that it occurred on the same day as the Great Chicago Fire, which gets much more attention. The kind of mythological story of the cow kicking over the lantern, same day, surprisingly. But unfortunately, and especially unfortunately for the people of Hawaii, we're at very real risk for that record to be broken.
Yeah.
With these fires that happened in Maui. It began on the morning of August 8th, early in the morning, I think around 6 a.m. And actually, the fire was declared 100% contained just before 9 a.m. But flare-ups of the fire occurred around 3 p.m. and by 5 p.m., the city of Lahaina, which is the historical capital of Hawaii, was in immediate danger of engulfment.
Yeah, the story I keep hearing is how fast this fire just devastated everything.
There were over 2,200 buildings destroyed in Lahaina, over 80% of which were residential. There's literally only like 4 small pockets. The very, very northern edge of Lahaina, the very, very southern edge, a bit of the eastern side, because it kind of looks like a sideways T, where most of the city hugs the coastline, but there's a little outcropping or a little jut out right in the center of the city that goes east. And the very eastern edge was okay. And there's like just the littlest bit right in the middle as well, oddly, that was not burnt down, but like the vast majority of an entire city burnt to the ground.
I mean, did you see the articles about how a miracle happened and that church survived?
Yeah, I'm sure 30 of them burnt to the ground with people in them. But yes, God saved the one building to show us his power. Good job. Yeah. Good job, all-powerful deity. Currently, the death toll is at 111, at least when I checked right when we were writing this, but there are over 1,000 people still missing, and very little of the area has been searched at this point.
Yeah, I believe...
It's like single-digit percentage.
Yeah, I believe that 111 found was like 3 to 5% of the total area searched. So they've got a lot more left.
At this point, if you're still missing 10 days later, odds are not very good.
Yeah.
So that 111 figure is going to climb steadily as this search continues. So what caused the fire? There's no official cause as of yet.
And unfortunately, there's a ton of speculation.
Yeah, there's a lot of craziness, but we'll stick to reality first. Hawaii was in a severe drought stage all summer. Temperatures were higher than normal due to both climate change and El Nino conditions. Hurricane Dora, probably the number one cause of why this fire was so bad. Hurricane Dora was 500 miles south of Maui at the time the fire started and was a Category 4 hurricane, causing wind gusts of over 60 miles per hour on the island. That meant that literally the fire was traveling at a mile a minute.
Correct. And obviously for anyone who knows how to build a fire, the one thing it needs over anything else is oxygen. And when you get that much wind going, it can get bad really fast.
And I saw a video that might be the actual start of the fire, or at least one of them. We'll include the link. But it's a video that shows a man waking up early in the morning, and there's power lines down, and you can see these high winds. The winds are just whipping across. And there's smoke and fire because of the down power lines, and that fire is just whipping past this guy. He called 911, and he was trying to basically use a hose, like a garden hose, to keep his property wet, like his lawn, as the fire was spreading across. But that was definitely down power lines that started that fire. Then again, like we said, there's been no definitive cause, but there already has been a lawsuit filed against Hawaiian Electric for not deactivating the power lines during the high winds.
And I think that's the predominant hypothesis right now, is that it's all this stuff, like just the worst combination of all these factors, and then the down power lines just triggered the whole thing.
And there's a lot of conspiracy theories. Literally, I heard Tim Pool say that, Marjorie Taylor Greene might be right.
Oh, no. What?
They might have space lasers.
Oh.
Not Jewish space lasers, but Chinese space lasers.
Oh,
started the fire.
Is this the land grab thing where like you saw like those pictures of the fire that supposedly is coming from the sky?
And they're all like just images from other places.
Yeah.
And other times. Like the one where it looks like it's coming from the sky is like a picture from Ohio.
Yeah.
And it was in the winter, so it was ice crystals that were reflecting the light and causing the light pillar. And there's another one that's from like South America somewhere. it's just ridiculous. It's just these crazy conspiracies, people posting these images like, oh, I don't know what's going on, but when I see this, it seems awful strange to me. So yes, there are a lot of conspiracy theories. There's a lot of, well, this was planned for weird New World Order. Ron Johnson probably has his own theories if someone were to ask him about it. But again, I mean, people are dead in rubble right now. So I just want to talk about reality and what actually happened. And, you know, maybe we can poke some fun at people later. But as this is pretty serious, I don't really want to go down those rabbit holes right now. So probably started due to down power lines in the winds, spread rapidly because of those high winds and the dry vegetation. How come so many people were caught in this? If we knew it was going on pretty early and we knew the fire was spreading, but again, like I said they had it contained 3 hours after it started, and then because of those winds, stray ember doesn't take much, starts up again. But there's one other issue. The sirens, the emergency siren system was not used at all.
And this seems to be the most outspoken part of the criticism from everybody.
Right. So what happened there? Well, according to the Maui Emergency Management Agency Administrator, Herman Andaya, in an interview on Tuesday, those sirens were not considered to be used.
So not that they couldn't have been used. They were explicitly chosen to not be used.
Right. He said we would not use sirens in a case like this. That's not what we would normally do. We just don't use sirens for fires. And he said officials instead opted to activate warnings through people's cell phones. The problem with that is that by the time these fires reignited around 3 p.m. and started spreading, electrical power and cell service was down in much of the area when it became apparent that evacuations were necessary.
Well, and so even I think it was today, the New York Times Daily Podcast put out a very, very emotional story about a guy who survived these fires, and warning again, it will destroy you emotionally with how tragic it is. I highly recommend listening to it just because of how informative it can be, what you can feel, like how intense this situation actually is from this story. And in it, I think he talked about how he woke up around 6-ish and he didn't have power nor cell service already by then. So even like by the morning, people didn't have cell service.
And also contradicting that idea that they wouldn't use them for fires. According to the actual website for this system, which is supposed to be the largest single integrated public safety outdoor siren warning system in the world. And according to their own website, which is MauiSirens.com, it says the all-hazard siren system...
Keyword there.
All-hazard... can be used for a variety of both natural and human-caused events, including tsunamis, hurricanes, dam breaches, flooding,
and
wildfires.
There it is.
Volcanic eruptions, terrorist threats, hazardous material incidents, and more.
So why were they doubling down on not using this?
And those sirens are solar-powered and can sound even when electricity is down through a satellite data signal. So it sounds like they would have been perfect in this scenario.
Really does. So why were they doubling down?
I will say, in the defense of Herman Andaya here, he did indicate, and it is true, because I read that website, what they tell you to do when you hear the sirens is turn on a TV or radio, listen to the emergency broadcast, and move inland, because generally it's a tsunami warning.
Sure.
And inland is where the fire was coming from.
And I think he was saying in those interviews afterwards that they do intend to use those predominantly for hurricanes and tsunamis.
Right.
So maybe that's what was triggering his
There
idea.
is certainly an argument that people were at least aware of the fire, and that if they had heard those alarms, they would have likely known that it was related to the fire. And also the idea that you're supposed to turn on your radio or try to figure out what's going on first,
right,
would also have led them to the correct information as to what was going on and gotten people to evacuate sooner. I will also say that for some reason, he says his reason, Herman Andaya resigned a day after giving that interview and defending his decision to not sound the sirens, citing health reasons.
Yeah, okay.
Might be he's trying to protect his pension. I guess you decide. He might have just the smoke, it was too much for me, and now I have to resign. I don't know. Sounds like he really has some trouble telling the truth, though. So instead of acting when they heard the sirens, and there is also an argument that it would have been difficult to hear with the wind. I understand that, but
still do something.
These sirens are meant to alert people. They're very loud. It's supposed to sound like a jet engine, but whatever. Instead of hearing those sirens and understanding that they needed to do something at that point, with no electricity, no cell service, many did not try to evacuate until they saw or smelled smoke. But as we were talking about 60-mile-an-hour winds, fire moving at 60 miles an hour, by then it was too late.
Well, and that kind of brings me back to that daily. I'll probably reference this daily podcast a lot, but in this guy's story, he talked about how his neighbors got him to say, hey, you need to go look at this right now. And they all came outside and they saw the smoke in the distance. They saw the fire and the smoke in the distance. And because they did not have any power, they had to talk amongst themselves on what they should do. And they came to the conclusion that it's far enough away that I'm sure the fire department will have it taken care of. We should stay in our homes because something bad will happen if we just run to the shores. Then after a little bit goes by, he sees that it's getting bigger. So then what he does is he has enough time to then go on his scooter to check out the fire, and he uses his scooter to get all the way down there, sees the chaos, rushes back, and by the time he rushes back, it's almost at their front door.
Right.
Because it's going so fast.
Mm-hmm. And the problem is there is only a single highway that runs along Lahaina. And I've been to Hawaii. I didn't go to Maui. I was on Kauai. This was in 2019, but it's set up the same way. There's really one single highway that goes around the island. And they even have it where it's 3 lanes. And in the morning, there are 2 lanes going in, I forget which direction, we'll say counterclockwise. And then in the evening, they switch it and it's 2 lanes going clockwise.
Okay.
Because it's just one main road that you take to go around. And it's the same way in this area of Maui. So you have everyone in the city trying to get away on the same road.
Well, on top of that, there were also issues, right? I think there were 2 ways of getting out, and main ways of getting out. And basically both were covered and it was a dead end because the fire encaps one area, so they couldn't get through because of the fire. And the other, power lines fell down and people were waiting for the Hawai'i Energy's crews to try to remove these power lines so people could leave, which is also, I think, another part of the lawsuit of Hawaii Electric.
So basically, everyone was snarled in standstill traffic.
Just stuck there.
And meanwhile, their cars were catching on fire.
Literally.
And exploding. And this led a lot of people to abandon their vehicles and take refuge in the only place that was available, the ocean.
Yep.
And there are so many stories, that's why so many people drowned.
Yeah.
Because you had to get far enough away from the land to not be inundated by the smoke or to not be literally burned by the heat from the fire. And in some areas, it was shallow enough where you could get far enough away and still touch the bottom and basically wade, even if it might have been, neck deep, but you were still able to stand, because we're talking hours and hours, 5 hours that you had to wait for this fire to burn down enough where you could approach the shore. And other people were not so lucky. You had these high winds. It might not have been sheltered enough. There would have been large waves and deep water. And I don't know about you, I cannot tread water for 5 hours.
Me neither, man.
Even with my natural buoyancy. And that's why many people drown.
Well, and I just want to really hit home the point that you said being burned by the air. That's not an exaggeration here, where you had people who were suffering major burns who were not being even exposed to the fire itself. They're not getting torched in the flames. They're not in a burning building. They're not anything. It's just the fire caused the air to be so hot and then being pushed by these huge winds from the hurricane. And it was just basically the same exact conditions as a blast furnace. So people are literally just boiling alive in just trying to find water to dip themselves into. I remember there was another part of this story in the daily podcast where there was this couple this guy found on the beach, and they were in swimsuits. The woman found some clothes to wear eventually, I think, but the guy was just in swim trunks. So he had nothing on the top of half of his body, and he was just burnt. and he wasn't even in anything. He was just burnt from being in the air too long. That's how bad this was.
Mm-hmm. I saw a video of someone basically stating how he survived, and he had left his home. He had some of his possessions with him, the things he wanted to save, some clothes, pictures, things like that he had set down. And he was in a bit of a canal, and the canal was lower than the surrounding. There were hills on both sides.
Okay.
He'd cut through a fence, and he was in this canal, and it's just a small trickle of water. Nothing that even, you could cover yourself in. It was like not even an inch deep. And as the fire came through, he got lower as down into the bottom of the canal as he could get. The things that he had brought with him burst into flames.
Jesus.
And there was no grass around. This is like a concrete canal. And you can just see these burnt hangers that he had his clothes in and scorch marks on the ground. And he was able to cover himself in like it looked kind of like a blanket. It was like a bundled up thing that was in this canal. And he was able to survive that way while all of his belongings combusted around him just from the heat of the flames. And what about the fire departments? Why weren't they able to contain this fire when things started to get out of control? They could have maybe just pushed a path down one of these main roads and at least gotten it to where people could get away. The problem was the water system also failed, leaving firefighters without water pressure to fight fires.
And basically trapped themselves.
The cause of that is still unknown, but the major theory that I've seen thus far, thanks to the New York Times, is that the fire was so hot that it melted water pipes in homes, causing the pressure to drop in their water system.
Homes were just destroyed and then just leaking water everywhere, which just caused the entire system to just drop pressure.
Right. And they said literally the pipes melted.
Yeah. There were also accounts from the firefighters saying that, and also because the winds were so strong, when they tried to, even at the beginning, when they had some water pressure, tried to actually take off some of the fire, the winds were so strong that felt like it was just like a mist that just get blown in the breeze.
Mm-hmm.
So even then, when they had pressure, the winds were so strong it wouldn't have even mattered anyway, because the water was just going everywhere where they didn't want to go.
And one really disgusting thing that I've seen in all of this is that people are reporting that they're being contacted by real estate investors and developers trying to get them to sell their homes, literally while their homes are still smoking.
Jesus.
And a lot of local groups are trying to tell people, don't sell. They are trying to avoid this turning into a situation where these large outside investors are going to come in to Lahaina and buy up all the property and basically price out anyone that tries to stay, and having all of these people that have lived here for generations lose their homes and lose their ability to stay in their hometown. And in Hawaii, that's already a huge issue because of the history of Hawaii and how they became a state.
Literally. Well, let's talk about that.
And this is something that has been on our list of topics for a while now. It's something that I always wanted to talk about. I did this research before I went to Hawaii because I wanted to learn more about it when I went there. And I thought I had a good idea of what happened. But when we were actually doing the research for this episode, I still managed to be surprised by how terrible the history of the U.S. annexation of Hawaii is. So it's something I want to talk about because I think it is relevant to this story, and it is connected, and it just shows the history of these predatory practices by American companies trying to basically steal land from Native Hawaiians. So this is what I want to talk about in the shadow of this, just to give the background and why I think that there should be a pause on any land sales or property sales in the aftermath of this tragedy. So what is the history between the United States and Hawaii? The first Americans that came to Hawaii were missionaries, of course, and traders in the early 18th century, many of whom stayed on the islands. As someone who's been to Hawaii, I completely understand. You think you know God. You think you know what the Garden of Eden is. If you go from Wisconsin to Hawaii...
I was going to say, like Missouri to Hawaii.
That will change your perspective a little bit. And then in the 19th century, sugar plantations were established on Hawaii, and American missionaries and planters had gained solid economic, religious, and political power on the island.
Fun little side fact, you'll also find a lot of Japanese and Filipino people in Hawaii, as well as technically the coast of California as well. And the reason why is because of these sugar fields. And interestingly enough, so we talked about how I came from a cult, where I was in a cult years ago, and it was a Filipino cult. And they believe that their members and Filipinos coming to America was a part of a literal prophecy by God foretold in the Bible. But what's interesting about that is that Filipinos actually came to Hawaii because sugar plantation owners were they were having issues with the Japanese immigrants at that time, because the Japanese immigrants were all communicating with each other and trying to revolt against the harsh work conditions that they were being put under. So instead of, taking care of their workers, these absolutely horrible, corrupt corporate assholes, I guess, then scouted the Philippines after World War II and basically found out that they speak a bunch of different dialects, cherry-picked people from all these different areas of the Philippines and placed them strategically along these sugar plantations so they couldn't communicate with each other and could not unionize or revolt. So, fun fact, a lot of the Asian immigrants are also here based on the same crappy capitalistic labor that we usually hear from, like, the jungle, for God's sakes. So, there's your fun little side tangent.
And then in 1840, a constitutional monarchy was established, stripping the Hawaiian monarch of much of their authority. During the next 40 years, Hawaii entered into a number of political and economic treaties with the United States. And in 1887, the U.S. naval base Pearl Harbor was established as part of a new Hawaiian constitution known as the Bayonet Constitution, because it was demanded by riflemen made up of an all-white pro-U.S. annexation group called the Hawaiian League. The Constitution undermines the authority of King Kalakaua and took away native Hawaiian land rights and gave the vote to foreign landowners.
Fantastic.
In 1891, the sister of King Kalakaua, Queen Liliuokalani, ascended to the throne, refusing to recognize the Constitution of 1887 and replacing it with a constitution restoring the power of the monarchy. And obviously, those rich white plantation owners
weren't happy.
Were not going to stand for that.
So then what?
In January of 1893, a Revolutionary Committee of Safety, organized by Sanford B. Dole, yes, the same Dole, he's the cousin of the Dole Fruit Company founder, staged a coup against Queen Liliuokalani with the knowledge and support of the U.S. Minister to Hawaii, John Stevens, and a force of Marines and artillery from the USS Boston, which landed at and invaded Honolulu. Queen Liliuokalani surrendered under protest to avoid any loss of life. In response to the Queen's conditional surrender of her authority, President Grover Cleveland sent Special Commissioner James Blunt to investigate the conditions surrounding the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy and report to Secretary of State Walter Gresham.
Sorry, I was thinking like James Blunt, like the songwriter and singer.
No idea.
Wrong wife. 2000s guy?
I have no idea.
You're beautiful.
Okay, I
You're
recognize
beautiful.
the song.
It's true.
I don't think that was him. Sorry. Gresham concluded in his report to the president that the United States committed acts of war in overthrowing the Hawaiian kingdom. I have a quote from that report. "Should not the great wrong done to a feeble but independent state by an abuse of the authority of the United States be undone by restoring the legitimate government? Anything short of that will not, I respectfully submit, satisfy the demands of justice."
Super woke President Cleveland.
This was the Secretary of State in his report to the president.
Oh, super woke Secretary of State.
And in response to that report, this is the part that I didn't know before doing this, which is crazy to me. Because of that report, President Cleveland sent a new U.S. minister to Hawaii to restore Queen Liliuokalani, who was under arrest ever since the takeover of the island, the illegal illegitimate, illegal takeover of the island.
That's insane. Oh my God.
So she was going to be restored to the throne.
Okay.
Under the 1887 Constitution. They weren't going to go crazy and give her, the full power of a sovereign monarch.
Oh,
but
of
they'll
course
go
not.
back to the pro-U.S. businessman by basically bayonet point Constitution. We'll go back to that one. But this is the President of the United States ordered this to happen. But Dole refused to step aside and instead proclaimed the independent Republic of Hawaii.
So now it's its own country.
Yes. Cleveland was unwilling to overthrow the government by force, and his successor, President William McKinley, negotiated a treaty with the Republic of Hawaii in 1897. Basically, we're not going to restore the monarchy. You can keep Hawaii. He was installed as the first governor of Hawaii. He won. In a standoff with the United States government,
Dole won.
The Dole...
The mighty fruit family
won.
Give me pineapples or give me death.
Then in 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out, and the strategic use of the naval base at Pearl Harbor during the war convinced Congress to approve formal annexation. 2 years later, Hawaii was organized into a formal U.S. territory, and in 1959, entered the United States as the 50th state.
And I think that's something to
Which is the only
repeat.
part that you learn in schools. Literally,
that they became the 50th
in
state.
1959, Hawaii became the 50th state. That's all that you learn.
But I don't think even a lot of people realize. Okay, so 1959. So during the attack of Pearl Harbor that everyone happens to know about,
It was a U.S. territory.
it was only a U.S. territory. It wasn't even a state yet.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind too. Like, this is how weirdly recent this is.
And also, just I cannot wrap my head around the fact that the United States admitted that it committed war crimes and illegally overthrew the monarch of a sovereign nation.
Yes.
And when they tried to restore that monarch,
The guy who was in power just said, no, screw off.
no, go away. And we were like, okay. And then a new president
Negotiated with them.
and just basically said, yeah, that's fine. You can just keep it.
Right.
That is insane.
That
And yet
is
we
insane.
we will pretend to this day that it's fine, that we have taken over Hawaii.
Yeah.
And if you were to teach this in school, I'm sure it would be like, oh, that's just critical Hawaiian theory.
I was really trying hard to put a CHT joke while you were talking in there. I didn't find a good spot. I'm glad we did.
So how does this connect? How does this possibly connect to the fires?
Capitalism.
It's
and
true.
And white people.
After a century and a half, 150 years of the primary use of the fertile volcanic farmland of Hawaii being used to only profit American companies by planting sugarcane and pineapples and clearing out all of the native plant life, those companies have now moved to countries with cheaper labor, and former plantations are being used for cattle grazing.
Just to make it clear, remember how we talked about how the migrants were facing horrible work conditions like in the jungle by Upton Sinclair. The invisible hand of the market economy.
Once it became too expensive.
To give people remember, we're not even in any decent territory. We're in the 1960s right now, right? Once it became semi-inconvenient to pay people a little bit more of a living wage, they moved on to other countries they could then fully take advantage of and exploit.
Mm-hmm.
So Ayn Rand wins?
And unfortunately, Hawaii loses. Those cattle farmers then planted non-native grasses, which quickly spread and were the main source of fuel for the fires to spread. So I will include the link to the New York Times article that goes in depth on exactly which non-native grasses were planted, how that they are very invasive, very quickly spreading. They are drought-proof, which meant they were all still alive during this drought that Hawaii was in during the summer, but they are also incredibly flammable.
Because they dry out so easily.
And they were the main source of fuel. And when you hear people talk about how it was like fire hail.
Yeah, it was raining down fire.
And it's all of this material, all this plant material blowing on the wind as it gets kicked way up with all of the heat and hot air rises and these grasses are very light and then rains down. So what can we do? We can't go back and prevent all of this from happening. We can't go kill Sanford P. Dole as much as we'd like to. Well, there are some mixed opinions.
I can't believe there are mixed opinions.
On whether tourists should visit Maui currently.
No, you should not be visiting. Put your fucking honeymoon aside, or if anything, do a freaking charity trip instead and go help. Don't go freaking tourist Maui right now. How is that a debate, Jason?
Well, I have seen some local small business owners, food truck owners, who are worried that if tourism to Maui would completely stop, and again, we're just coming out of basically not being concerned about COVID anymore, even though it's still a thing, that it would cause their businesses to go under, which I am sympathetic with. I would say, as you said, definitely do not vacation near Lahaina. And if you want to go and volunteer,
that's great.
But only if you can actually help.
Also true.
Don't just go and get in the way and take selfies. If you have some training or some ability that would be useful in this situation, by all means, you should go. If you're willing to spend 12 hours a day sifting through rubble, knowing that you're probably going to encounter some bodies, then fine. I'm sure they could use the help. But if you're going to be sitting there taking selfies and using resources that could be spent on people that are actually going to help, then don't.
Well, can I also even add a little caveat for my own sake as well? Also, don't go volunteer if you're part of a religious mission where your actual motive is to go preach and recruit for your religion.
Which is how we got into this mess in the first place.
I don't know. Just the idea of having the absolute devastation and having these...
Have you heard the good news?
Having these little hoity-toity people from Missouri coming in and literally say, have you heard the good news? We're going to fix up some house, and we did a really bang-up job, didn't we? Screw off. I will punch you in the face.
You also have to keep in mind, like we said, 80% of the buildings that burned down were residential. There's a huge shortage of housing. You going there and taking up hotel space is not helping.
No.
Another tip, don't go snorkeling in the water that we were just talking about people drowning in. Someone's family member was just floating dead 10 days ago. Don't go snorkeling in those areas. Don't go out on sightseeing trips through the rubble.
Oh, they wouldn't, would they? People aren't going to do that.
America.
No.
Consider I will understand. Trust me, as someone who does not have a lot of money, but I do like taking trips, and a lot of things are non-refundable. Get travel insurance. It's a small cost, and you can avoid situations like this. But say you don't have it, you stand to lose thousands of dollars. You've been looking forward to this vacation for years. I get it. But consider visiting a different island if you must go, or at the very least, another area of Maui that was not impacted by the fires. What can you do if you're not going to be in Hawaii? As we said at the beginning, you can donate to the Red Cross. You can also visit the Hawaii Alliance for Progressive Action website,
which we'll also link in the show notes.
So Hawaii Alliance for Progressive Action, Hawaii.org. They have... And it's changes every hour. When I first saw this site, they had this big list of GoFundMe pages that they were going through and vetting for people that actually lived in Lahaina. They had the Red Cross, they had the Salvation Army, they had the local Humane Society, they had all of these. The links don't seem to work on the page currently, but I'm hoping they will fix that by the time you hear this. But we'll link to their page because not only does it have all of those things that you can donate to, but it also has the list of the predatory actions being taken against Hawaiians in the aftermath of the fire. It warns people to stay away from these developers that are calling. There are out-of-state lawyers that are calling and preying on Hawaiians. There seems to be a scheme brewing to try to take water rights away from people. So all of that is laid out on the site. It's a very nice site. I would suggest suggest checking that out if you want to help. As we mentioned earlier, we are going to be off for the next 2 weeks. I have an out-of-town wedding coming up next week.
I gotta go teach.
Yeah, you've got some other things going on as well. You're not going to be available. So we won't have the big episode 100 spectacular when it's just a regular episode for a couple weeks yet. We're going to leave you this week with the song Aloha Oi by Queen Liliuokalani. I think it's very appropriate. On its face, it is a love song about two lovers that are going to be separating and their desire to one day be able to see each other again. This song was written while she was under arrest during the occupation of Hawaii, and you could certainly read into it that possibly she was singing about an independent Hawaii, that she was having to say goodbye
to her independent Hawaii,
and that someday she hoped that it would come back again.
So for now, we'll see you next time.
Aloha.